Nobody's ever ripped the piss out of you who's better than you. It's one of the truest things that's ever been said, and it changed my whole outlook on that. Because just because somebody tells you that you're not good enough doesn't mean that you're not. My unwavering belief in myself now is probably my strongest tool. And I've got a great ability to surround myself with extremely talented people. Business is funny, but it changes people. It changes people's mindset. Everyone's different, and I'm not appeased by money, which makes me extremely difficult to deal with.
Before we get started, the team here at the Coast and Commerce podcast want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where this podcast is created, the Kabi Kabi and Jinnabara people. We honour their rich culture of storytelling as we share the inspiring stories of business leaders across the Sunshine Coast. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Let's get on with the show. Welcome back to the Coast and Commerce podcast. This is the show where we bring inspiring stories from Sunshine Coast business leaders to help you in business, whatever you do here on the Sunshine Coast. I'm Ben Amos from Innovate Media, and one of those inspiring business leaders we've got here today is Tony Kelly from Tony Kelly Restaurant Group, but you might also know him from some of the amazing restaurants around the coast like Rice Boy, Giddy Geisha, Piggyback, Market Bistro. There are some other ones as well, I'm sure we'll get into. But Tony, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. Great intro. You make me blush.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit about your story. So I know many people on the Sunshine Coast have probably either been to your restaurants or know of them, but they might not know of you too much. So can you tell us a little bit about your story? What got you into what you do today?
So I was a budding golfer when I was at school. I wanted to be a golf pro as a young fella, but I got all the way up to, I think I was playing off 2 or 3 at the time, and my old man gave me a gap year straight after school. But I think I got 6 months into that gap year and realised it was never going to happen. And I loved cooking, and I was really passionate. My mum and grandmother were very passionate cooks at home, so I thought, you know, if you love what you do, why don't you follow down that sort of career path? So I started my apprenticeship as a 18-year-old, and the Hyatt Coolum, when it was a proper 5-star hotel, was, you know, sort of was the birthplace of my culinary journey, and spent about 5 or 6 years there, and sort of really got a strong craving and passion to see the world and to cook for a living. So fast forward now, you know, I finished my apprenticeship in '98, travelled a bit, did a bit of work in the US, worked for Disney, spent some time up on Hayman Island. The wine bar was kind of when my wife and I cemented ourselves back on the Sunshine Coast, and you know, we had that in Dewporth Avenue in Maroochydore for 7 or 8 years, I think, and it's probably the wine bar comes up in conversation with me weekly, several times, maybe 5 or 6 times a week. People either, you know, met there, got married there, did business there, had a funeral there. Or, you know, it was so heavily involved in so many Sunshine Coast locals' lives that when it came time for me to come back into business again for myself, it was always going to be the Sunshine Coast. I wanted to raise my family here, and this is home. And now we've got several good restaurants on the Sunshine Coast, and they're trading well, and the locals really look after us. So we're fortunate.
Yeah. I dare say the early days of the wine bar, the culinary scene on the Sunshine Coast probably was very different to what it is today. I would say that was probably one of the only restaurants of its type, you know, in the region at that time.
Certainly south of the bridge. I mean, we always talk in the hospitality game, there's north of the bridge, which is Noosa, and then there's south of the bridge, which is sort of Mooloolaba. Maroochydore certainly didn't have anything. There was their bistro, Daniel Jarrett, who's now cooking up at this, the Spices Tamarind property. He's a good friend and a very talented chef. He was the head chef at a restaurant called Ebb, which is sort of was tucked behind the Dewporth Tavern there. That was really, really good. Then there was the Spirit House and us, and that was kind of it. Harry's on Budrum. And then if you wanted another decent feed, you needed to go to Noosa. So back in the day, we felt like we were a bit before the time. I reckon you could drop that restaurant right now into the fray and it would go well. I feel there's a part of me that thinks that Market Bistro is probably a little nod to that restaurant. There's a lot of similarities there, and a lot of die-hard wine bar fanatics certainly go into the restaurant, into Market Bistro, and enjoy themselves now.
Yeah.
Share a story or two.
Yeah. So I know you kind of talked about that was, quite a lot of history that you spanned over a short amount of time there. And, it hasn't all been ups and successes along the way. No. I know there's been failures as well. So, I do want to kind of go into a little bit of the ups and downs throughout today's episode. And so that's a little teaser to keep people sticking around. But, you have been described, I've read anyway, that you've been described as the king of cuisine or the restaurant baron of the Sunshine Coast. How do those kind of titles or those ideas kind of sit with you?
Not real well. I mean, I guess. It's nice in a way, but when people gloss over the hard work, and I know they don't mean to do that, because it's nice when somebody calls you a restaurant baron, or you got the Midas touch or something like that. But there's a part of me that goes, well, it's not as easy as that. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. There's been a lot of fails, and a lot goes into it. You just don't click your fingers and suddenly you've got, we've got 500 staff, depending on what time of year it is, all with a set of problems, and all, you've got to, you wear that the burden of knowing that today I'm paying their salaries that will feed their families and pay their rent, and that pressure's on me to make sure the restaurants are busy enough this week to be able to do it again next week. And that doesn't come overnight, Our success and our knowledge has been built off the back of our fails. So, yeah. So I want to make sure in this episode that what we share, or what you share, is relevant to anyone in any sort of business on the Sunshine Coast or beyond. And, I think one of the key things that I see from where I sit of what you're kind of putting together with the various restaurants is something that intrigues me, I guess, is as a leader, or maybe a visionary for where you're taking the group of restaurants. Well, how much of that success that you've had currently is like idea or concept versus execution? I think it's both. Our growth is determined by our people. So we won't grow, we won't execute on an idea unless we've got the people waiting in the wings. So we find the restaurant group is an incubator for young talent who either don't have the means or don't have the knowledge to go out and do it themselves. And if we can in some way assist and educate and also provide an opportunity to those people, then that's the future of our growth. We're not actively out there trying to grow and be the biggest and the best. We're very focused on what we already have, and if there's some young people coming through our ranks, and we see that there's an opportunity or an idea that seems to fit the mould and fit the times, then we'll jump at it. So. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we don't sort of go, look, I want to do a Mexican restaurant, and then we go out and find a space, and then we try and find the people. It's exactly the opposite to that. We find the people and go, look, we think that the industry right now there's a gap on the Sunshine Coast for this concept. Yeah. And then we have a look at our current pool of talent and go, I wonder if this guy is keen or this girl is keen, and then we'll have a yarn to them, and we'll try and get a bit of a business plan together and start the roots of the conceptual idea. And if all those dots join, then we'll go looking for a site. So it's certainly not an overnight make a decision, sign a lease, roll into it, because there's too much at stake. In the restaurant game, I can only speak about the restaurant games because I know it very well. It can take the house of cards. One bad mistake can cost you hundreds and thousands of dollars, and if you sign a wrong lease, it can cost you millions of dollars and take everything from you. So you've got to be super careful, and there's a lot of thought process and there's a lot of research that needs to happen for that to go.
And I think in any industries, like I think the hospitality game is one of the most volatile potentially, to various things. And there's a lot on the line as well, right? So launching a restaurant, you don't necessarily know if it's going to be a success, and you've already invested a lot.
It's very fickle, right? Yeah. And everyone, the general public are vicious with it. They're always looking for that next best thing, the new flash shiny restaurant. So that in itself is hard. It's hard to be cemented as a favourite for somebody. But the restaurant industry is so unregulated. Anybody can open a restaurant, and the general rule of thumb is if you go out more than twice a week, you're a restaurant critic and a professional restaurateur. So and then a lot of mum and dads, end up investing or opening their own cafe or restaurant or wine bar, thinking it's kissing cheeks and shaking hands. And I think that's where a lot of the catastrophe happens because, as I said, it's very easy to lose a shitload of money really, really quickly.
Yeah. So you think about, one of your, I guess, probably most popular restaurant, maybe not most popular, but well-known restaurants, Rice Boy on the coast here.
Yep.
That I think was one of your earlier current iterations of venues.
Yep.
And it seems like there's a bit of a mould that one's kind of created there that you've then kind of rolled out into your other restaurants in Piggyback, Giddy Geisha and
correct
and so on. Is that the way you look at it? Like it's kind of like, not that you got the Midas touch, but not that it's a guaranteed success.
Because what a lot of people fail to appreciate or to mention was we opened Rice Boy in 2017, and the general consensus when I said I signed a lease at the Wharf was everyone called me an idiot. Because
prior to the development of the Wharf, right?
Yeah, the Wharf, unlike Ocean Street, when I had restaurants in Ocean Street was buggered. There was homeless people everywhere. There was hardly any shops opened. There was nothing there. The Wharf felt like it was a ghost town. A lot of people thought it was falling down. It was derelict. There was no leases in place. It was done. The developers who currently brought it, Evans Long, they had the foresight to jump in, invested a lot of money, and one of the things that Dirk Long sort of said to me, which cemented my decision to go in there in my head, was the fact that he wanted the Wharf to be his family's legacy. And Matt Evans, who's his business partner, he's a Sunshine Coast boy. My father did a lot of work with his dad back in the day, and I realised that Sunshine Coast legacy for their families was very important to them. So I thought failure is not going to be an option for these guys. So I had a lot of very fond memories of the Wharf as a kid, being the place where you wanted to go. And if your mum and dad happened to say we're going to the Wharf today, you thought all your Christmases had come at once. Yeah. So I knew that it had been there before. So we opened Rice Boy, and it was a slow burn at the start. It was really hard. We had probably a quarter of the size of space that we had now, and it was full maybe on a Saturday night. We started off... it was good. We started off with a bit of a bang, but it wasn't, the revenue that we're doing today, we'll probably end up doing today on a Monday was about the same revenue as what we're doing for 7 days of trade when we first opened. A lot of people just reckon we went bang, and it was. But over a 6 or 8 month period, it grew, and we soon realised that we'd really struck a chord with the coast locals. And one of the driving factors of that, we opened in November 2017. Our first winter, when it's rainy and it's cold and it's a Monday night and you've got a full restaurant, that is the definitive moment where you go, well, we've got a proper business here. Because I challenge you to find another one on the coast, no matter where you go, that's the same. So we just, off the back of knowing that, we took on a bit more space and a bit more space and a bit more space. We started off with 170 square metres of space at the Wharf, and that was the Rice Boy footprint. And I think Rice Boy is about it's a tad over 450 square metres now. It's a massive venue. It takes a lot of work just to keep it maintained and clean, and it's a beast. So if you look at what it is now, and you try and think about it being that small little joint back in the water. At the Wharf there, where nobody knew where it was, it's hard to fathom.
Yeah.
But that was the start. That was it. And you're right. When we knew that we were onto something there, people love the food, so we used the DNA, which is Rice Boy, and we developed Giddy Geisha. And then from Giddy Geisha, we wanted a bit of a land play, so we brought the freehold out at Palmwoods, and we knew that hinterland sort of area is really undercooked on the Sunshine Coast, and that's my patch. I live out there, and so we jumped in and used that same DNA that we knew was successful at Rice Boy, and those 2 restaurants were born off the back of it. We'll never do another Rice Boy bar. I used to say I'll do one in Noosa and I'll do one in Caloundra, and I shouldn't never say never, but we don't want to cut and paste. Like I think the success of Giddy Geisha and Piggyback are the fact that it's not Rice Boy. It's, I believe, people ask me all the time about what's my favourite restaurant. I can say that my favourite Asian restaurant, the food I think is the best at Giddy Geisha. I probably eat Piggyback's food more because it's close to my home and it's bloody good.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy Rice Boy as well. But there's something about the Giddy Geisha food. I don't know. It's really good. It's just these very small little tweaks that we do with the menu. But we're not going to be this cookie cutter where we have a success story and we just cut and paste. It just becomes plastic. And I think that you walk into some of these venues that have got multi-sites and I think there's a bit of a lack of soul in it. You know what I mean? So we want every restaurant to have its own personality. It wants to talk to itself, about itself when you walk in there. And I think that that has been successful. We've managed to do that. Yeah,
it's an interesting mindset to have as a business owner, because my gut feel is that the easy option would be to copy and paste, right? To be like, well, Rice Boy is successful, let's have Rice Boys in every suburb or around Australia or whatever that kind of expansion plan is.
Yep.
But the way that you've gone by taking that DNA as you described it and then replicating that is, I think, as a business owner, it kind of inspires other ideas for me in other industries.
Yep.
That's a similar sort of playbook that I think other people could potentially consider is, how do you expand by taking the DNA of what you do well here into not a whole other industry? Like you're still in restaurants, right? But you're not competing restaurants now. Instead, people will go to Rice Boy and then next weekend they'll go to Giddy Geisha and then next weekend they'll go to Piggyback, because it's not like, well, we've already been to Rice Boy.
If you take the crux of our conversation we're having right now and go, you've got a very successful podcast here. You could do a podcast that's based around lifestyle or four-wheel driving or fishing, or all you got to do is change the topic, research, educate yourself. You've got the crux of it. You know what mics to use. You know how to film. You've got the foundation right. All you got to do is educate yourself in and around a different space, and I think you can do that. Restaurants are funny. Like I think if I was to tell you some of the opportunity that's been presented to us to franchise, license agreement, roll out Rice Boys, you'd probably think I was mad not to do it. But there's a part of me that, as stupid as it may be, I want to protect Rice Boy, because I feel like the Sunshine Coast owns it as much, if not more, than what I do, because my success would be nothing without the Sunshine Coast, and the Sunshine Coast diehard locals have supported me in what I've done so well. So I don't want to take the piss by, opening at Southbank or opening at the Gold Coast or Tweed Heads, or, I just don't want to do that. And I've done that. We did that with Junk when I was there, and it was fun and it was successful. It's a beast and it's still going really well now. But I realised we're not a shopping centre model. We're not a franchise brand. We want the design process, the birth of a new baby. We want that. That's what excites us, and that's what I think excites the locals. And when people go, what's the next one? I think when we do it, it will be completely different, and it'll be fun, and people will jump all over it, I reckon.
Yeah, very cool. So as you mentioned, though, it hasn't all been successes and instant kind of, hits out of the park.
Can't you see the bags under my eyes?
Well,
the grey hair.
Yeah, so I'm interested to explore with you, and however much you're happy to share around, those failures as well, and how you've moved on from those, or maybe tell us about those.
It's a deep pool. I mean, I've had a lot of fails. I mean, even if you look back at the wine bar, I mean, I joke about with Ken Reid from Reid Property Group. He was one of my business partners. Him and his dad Harry were instrumental in my life, and I would consider them to be close friends, family friends, and he always jokes around about the fact that we didn't make any money out of the wine bar. We've got successful businesses now, and he sits back in the wine bar. He sits back at Market Bistro now, and he goes, "Why wasn't it like this when we had the wine bar?" But I suppose that's 20 years of education now, because when I was at the helm of the wine bar, all I cared about was making people happy. The financial success of the restaurant, as much as I cared about it, it was secondary. So the GFC come along and flogged us to death. We managed to get out of the wine bar, basically sold the lease for nothing. We still had a bunch of bills that we needed paying, and we had the wine bar, we had a deli called the Kitchen Pantry. We also had Il Secondo, which was an Italian restaurant. All got flogged because just the if you're on the Sunshine Coast during the GFC, it was catastrophic. We went from doing, I don't know, 600 or 700 people a week at wine bar to 50. It was bad. So after we got belted there, and I moved away with our tail between our legs and tried to regroup and try and get a bit of a bank balance back up. I mean, we sold our car to pay our last bill, my share of the bill. So that was hard. But off the back of that fail, I got offered a great opportunity to go and open the Steakhouse, which probably in my career is a real cornerstone. It's probably laid the foundation of the success that I've had now. But you know, there's a raft of things that have failed. I even most recently a fish and chip shop called Saltwater, which we signed a lease at the wharf with, and we lost a bunch of money. We just weren't good enough. And I soon realised that, you know, you need to be really, really laser focused on what you want to do, and really tap into that market and know what the locals and what people want. Now, as much as when I go out for fish and chips, I want to have fresh local line caught snapper, and I'm happy to pay. But the reality of it is that families that go out for fish and chips can't afford to pay that amount of money. And the market who is happy to pay that is very shallow. So the guys who do it really, really well, all of the fish and chip shops that are attached to the Mooloolaba Slipway down Mooloo River Fisheries and so forth, down that end of the spit, they do it well. And trying to compete with those guys, you're better off just leaving it to them, because they've got the best fish. They can sell it cheap, and you just get the best value for money. So we tried and got belted. So that was hard. You know, even down to when we first opened Spiro, we opened with a bang and probably took our eye off the prize a little bit. We never got to the stage where the restaurant was losing money, but you know, it took a lot of work to really sink our teeth back into it. And you know, now it's a fantastic business. But I've had you know, my relationship with the best friend fail due to junk, and probably our expansion, and you know, we took on more business partners, and all that went to custard, and very valuable lessons that I probably wouldn't change any of it, because that's put me in the mindset that I have now, and it's educated me in a way that I would never have had the knowledge without that beating. So it was hard, and I suppose I look at how I pulled myself up off the couch from that, because that was a big business. That was the last foray before Rice Boy opened was a business called Worldwide Hospitality Group, which I ended up selling my share of that business out. But that was off the back of a conversation with my business partners, where they sat down and said, "Your service is no longer required. We don't want you here anymore."
Right, that's not easy to take.
That's a kick in the nuts, especially when I was the only hospitality guy in our partnership, and you know, to sit down and have that said to you, it's you know, it's really, really hard. Business is funny, but it changes people. It changes people's mindset. Everyone's different, and I'm not appeased by money, which makes me extremely difficult to deal with. I've got a very happy marriage. I've got great children, and they're the most important things to me. So I could be dead broke in the gutter, but if I've got my wife and kids next to me, I'm the richest man in the world. So when you start talking or trying to negotiate or strong arm me around money, it's completely fruitless, because I don't care. I protect it and I value it because we've got business partners, but you know, that's secondary to me. And if it wasn't the undying belief my wife has in me and my ability to run a business and cook, that was the only reason I got off the couch. I was in a dark place. It was challenging times, but yeah, it was. Rice Boy wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for Melissa Kelly, that's for sure.
There you go. A lot to be said for having that support network around you of those
sure.
that lift you up and drive you forward.
It's hard to start again when you're north of 40, It's hard because you I suppose your motivation and everything changes as you get older. I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't for her. I don't know what I would have done for a career to feed my family, but the day she kicked me off the couch and told me to grow up and basically believe in myself again, we didn't have enough money in the bank account to pay for our kids' school fees. So it was a trying time.
Yeah, there's when we were prepping for this interview, you shared a little bit about that, and it made me think of the book Fail Forward by John Maxwell. There's a quote in that where he says that 90% of businesses who fail they're not actually defeated, that they just quit, right? And what I hear from you is you didn't quit, right? You could have quit. Mm-hmm. I imagine you could have quit.
I wanted to.
Yeah. And have done something else.
Yeah.
I'm sure you would have found something, right? But you didn't. You picked up, you moved forward, and you learned from those, I guess, failures, to use that in inverted commas, right?
Yeah, and somebody once told me that nobody's ever ripped the piss out of you who's better than you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I felt like I'd failed and I wasn't good enough. And then when they told me that, and you're laying in bed in a really quiet time in your own head, and if you say that to yourself, it's one of the truest things that's ever been said, and it changed my whole outlook on that. Because just because somebody tells you that you're not good enough, it doesn't mean that you're not. It's just how you bounce back from that. And I think my unwavering belief in myself now is probably my strongest tool, because I just believe that I can do it. So, and I've got a great ability to surround myself with extremely talented people. And yes, I can cook, but geez, I'm good at HR. And I think if you look at our team of people, Harry at Bocker, Luke Stringer, Mitch Smith, Eliza Malloy, the list goes on and on. Justin at Market Bistro, Zasha, my personal assistant, she's got no right to be a personal assistant. She should be a CEO of a company. You look at that repertoire of talent that I've got there. I can't teach those guys anything. They're teaching me something every single day. I just give them a great stage to play on and orchestrate their willingness to cook and to look after people and to run businesses, and we give them that stage and let them go. Give them the tools that they need, and the success of those restaurants are very much dependent on those guys.
Yeah. If there's any recipe for success, I think that's it.
It's
right?
people,
yeah, the people.
Because I can't be there. I'm here talking to you. The restaurants are busy today, so I couldn't do it without them.
Yeah.
And my father taught me once. He said it once, and I remember thinking really, really hard about what he meant by it. And as a young kid, I didn't understand. But he said, if you open a business and you can't walk away from it, you don't have a business. You've got a job. Mm. And it baffled me about it. And it wasn't until I really sunk my teeth into business I really realised that it's so true. Even if you look at, there's 1,000 different careers out there, like doctors who earn great living, but if they go on holidays, they don't earn. Their business stops.
Right.
But if you can create a great business that, one, you've got something to sell, but two, you can walk away, take a few days off, and your business is still ticking over. You can put these systems in place where it can still manage without you for a period of time. That's I believe is a very big definition of business.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for sharing that. I just as we start to wrap up here, I want to talk about the Sunshine Coast. So This is the Coast and Commerce podcast. We focus on success stories from the Sunshine Coast. But for you were born and grew up here on the Sunshine Coast. You went away for a while. You came back to the coast. Why the coast for you as a place to do business?
Don't know. It's tough to do business here. The diehard Sunshine Coast locals are fiercely protective of the place. But I guess it's funny where you call home. Like my wife is from Brisbane. We lived in Brisbane for a while, and it wasn't until we had our second baby, Connor, and she was like, it feels like we need to go back to the Sunshine Coast. She goes, we lived there for 10 years. It feels like home. And it's something about, I don't know whether it's just where where your roots are. Like I drive around Maroochydore and around Maroochydore Waters and stuff, and that was all bush. My father was in business on the Sunshine Coast for 40 years. I think it's got a lot to do with that, because I can remember his business cards. He had a large crane hire business called Kelly Green Crane Hire, and every business card said the local lads. And he always used to say to me, if you look after the Sunshine Coast locals, they'll look after you. And it's not until you look at Rice Boy and its statistics where, yes, we peak up because during school holiday times the population of Mooloolaba triples, but we get another spike straight after the school holidays because all the locals come back out. So the locals go, we're not going during school holidays because it's shit to park there at the best of times. So as soon as the school holidays are over, all the locals come back out. So it's like they really support you. If you've got a great product and you look after them, they will fiercely look after you. And I'm assuming, I can only speak about the Sunshine Coast, but when we had our business in Toowoomba, it was exactly the same. Target the locals, if you've got specials or whatever, or even down to your marketing. If you can make sure your marketing is pointed at the locals, then they'll look after you. And we try and do a lot for charity, and a lot that we sort of don't spruik about. Like every Christmas, we give each of we give the restaurant manager and the head chef $1,000 and say, go to your local Coles or Woolies. Just look for somebody that might be down and out, who are clearly buying their Christmas lunch gear, and give them $300 and buy their groceries for them for Christmas. And we don't spruik about that through media, but we look forward to that. We're talking about it now, ready for Christmas now. We're all excited about it because it's a really fun thing to do. So it's going back, and I know sometimes it's a bit of a throwaway line. Give back to the community, but if you really do, and it doesn't have to be that. And a lot of people can't afford $1,000, but you don't have to do that. I drove past a little girl just near the back streets near the plaza there, and she was selling lemonade on a lemonade stand, and I thought, big fan of Gary V, and he will always stop. Yeah. And I stopped, and there was a litre of lemonade, and I gave you $20 to buy it all, but I didn't take any of it because I thought, young kid out having a crack, and the mum couldn't believe it, and I said, that's Rice Boy buying all your lemonade for you. And I said, if you ever put it in a bottle, make sure you come and see us, and we'll sell it in the restaurant. And this little kid's eyes was lit up, but that's fun, and that's my way. It doesn't have to be a lot, but that's, I think, is in essence what being a local is all about, And it doesn't even have to be that. It can be picking up a bit of rubbish and putting it in the bin. But if you look after your community, it will look after you. I think that's what it means to be a Sunshine Coast local.
Yeah.
It gets lost in the cities, because there's so many people, and it's always so busy, and it's like, everyone's trying to scratch together one more minute of the day, where the Sunshine Coast is where we live and it's our home. Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. So what's next, Tony? What's next for you? Can you share the next Tony Kelly Restaurant Group opening plans? Look, to be honest with you, we don't have one. We went into 2024 saying it's not going to be a gap year, but at the beginning of the year it was a strange sort of time around our economy. A lot of people feeling a lot of pain. So we thought, rather than jump into a project, let's just hold tight for 24. If something comes across the desk, we'll have a look at it. And there is a lot of opportunity on the Sunshine Coast at the moment. But we're right now planning for 2025, and there's a couple of things we're looking at, but nothing secured. But we're super keen to do another Italian concept, maybe just focus around pizza because it's been so successful at Boca. We've got a very cool Mexican concept we want to roll out, and I would love to do a proper, really well-done steakhouse, like a Peter Luger's from New York City, that style of steakhouse. So I don't have sites. We've spoken to a lot of people. We're in no rush. But this year has been a bit of consolidation and making sure we've got all the systems in place, and this year will be the first year since 2017 that we haven't opened a venue, and to be honest with you, it's been kind of cool.
Nice.
Had a couple of early marks, and just like yours, we've launched a podcast which has been really fun with a real good friend of mine, Peter Marchant and Corey, who looks after all of our audio visual stuff. And seeing those guys get an opportunity to own their own thing, and all I do is chat on it, so I'm no brains of that operation. But we've got to speak to some really interesting people, a lot of industry people, a lot of friends, which is kind of cool. But yeah, 2025 might be a bit of an action-packed year. We'll see. I won't bite off more than what I can chew, but we've got the people, we've got the concept. So probably after this, we'll have 10,000 developers ring me up, going, "Oh, I heard you got a Mexican concept." But anyway, we'll see what happens. But it's we'll see the rest of this year out with what we've got. And all the restaurants are really busy, which is fantastic, and looking forward to Christmas and a bit of a break, which is great.
Yeah, you mentioned before the Evans and Long developers at the wharf. One of those guys mentioned that it was his legacy. Here on the coasts. What's your legacy? That's
an easy one. My legacy is for firstly my children, but when we first opened Rice Boy, I sat down with Mitch and Eliza, and as I was saying before we started filming, that we always say that we want to. It's our people. We want to make sure that we be famous for something, and we said very, very clearly one of our biggest ethos is we want to be the best employer on the Sunshine Coast. And I would like to see when our people move on, they might be with us for a couple of years and they move to Melbourne, that when, maybe the Steakhouse in Melbourne grabs their CV and they see Market Bistro, Rice Boy, Boca, they go, got to get this person in.
Yeah.
That type of legacy for me is really important to us. I want to really stand for something in our industry, and it's been an industry of rape and pillage for years and years, in particular with staff. And I see it feels like the land of broken dreams and promises, because a lot of restaurant owners overpromise and underdeliver. Where we've tried to be the opposite of that. We tried to underpromise and overdeliver. And if we can push through some really, really good, talented young people through the system and create future business owners, or just even people who want to go overseas and cook and pour wine and, develop a career out of this industry, that's success for me. It really is. So hopefully I've answered that question well enough for you. But I suppose primarily we want to be the best employers on the Sunshine Coast, but if we can provide an avenue and a platform for developing future leaders, that would be cool.
Yeah. Well, that's the definition of legacy, is something that then perpetuates through those people, right?
Yep.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Tony, for people who are interested in maybe listening to your podcast or following more of what you've got going on, where's the best place for people to follow you? Is it LinkedIn, or where's your podcast
LinkedIn, or behind podcast is the link, and I say that I'm the least tech savvy guy, so even when I listen to it, I go straight onto the Behind Podcast Instagram page and follow the links, and you can either watch it on YouTube or Spotify, or jump on the TonyKellyRestaurantGroup.com.au. It's got links everywhere for it, so and you can check out the restaurants, make bookings, and do everything from there. And all those platforms, we're live, we're really active on all of them, so we shouldn't be too hard to find if somebody's interested in having a listen or sending me a message. By all means, it's fun.
Awesome. Hey Tony, thanks for joining me on the Coast and Commerce podcast today.
Pleasure, mate. It's cool, and I'm chuffed that you reached out, and it's great. You've got a great podcast here, and I enjoy listening to it. So well done.
Awesome, thank you. And for you guys watching or listening, make sure you hit subscribe or whatever podcast player or on YouTube, so that you don't miss another episode. We'll have links to the places that Tony shared there in the show notes page for this podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye.